What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my top 5 cards coming out of Rising Rampage. Now, Rising Rampage's sneak peek is this weekend at the time of recording this video, and I like bringing you guys this video before then, just so you guys know what I personally have my eyes on. We'll be bringing you the full set review and spoiler sometime next week, just so you guys can have a full breakdown. And this is the first core set we're going to have going into the 2019-2020 competitive format, so when the regionals start kicking back up, or even when Pro Play Tour Philly comes around on August 17th or 18th, you guys are going to have the chance to try these cards for yourself and see how they affect our competitive format. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Kicking things off with number 5, we actually have a TCG exclusive card, Capshell. Now, Capshell, for those of you who don't know, is a level 2 Dark Fiend effect monster with an effect that reads as follows. You can only use one of the following effects of Capshell per turn and only once that turn. If this card is tributed, you can draw one card. If this card is used as material for a fusion, synchro, or link summon, you can draw one card. And if this card is detached from an Xyz monster to activate that monster's effect, you can draw one card. So you can start to see a pattern here. Now, being a TCG exclusive, this is one of the few cards that we actually don't really have tons of insight on from the OCG, because typically we know 80 to 90% of the cards that are coming out and see how they've performed in the OCG, and that kind of translates here in the TCG more often than not, although our formats are different and there are many exceptions to that rule. However, even though this card is seemingly innocuous, I feel like there is some potential here. First off, this is a secret rare, and I know we've had tons of bad secret rares in the past, but this is a secret rare that just says draw one card on it, being used in a plethora of different ways, and then you just kind of start to brainstorm all the different things you can do with it. I mean, just as a very simple example, you can just like normal summon this, go up into All Mirage, and then draw a card, and you've gone +1 at the cost of your normal summon. Is that good? It's not bad. I mean, it's okay, but then the fact too, if you have ways to recur this and you can link it off again, you're going to continuously draw cards. As soon as this card hits the field in some way, if you have any way to recur it to continue using it for link summons or anything like that, you're going to be able to keep drawing cards and generating advantage off of it. And yeah, it may only be a once per turn effect, but I don't really think that's a hindrance here, because I feel like this card has lots of potential. Being in the dark attribute means it has tons of potential to be sent to the graveyard very easily or resurrected, because dark has the most support of any attribute of any other attribute in the entire game. I don't know. I feel like there's potential here. This may be like my wild card pick, but definitely don't count this card out. So I wanted to just shed some light on it, just because I think it was a rather interesting design, and that's why I gave it my number 5 slot. But coming in at number 4, we have the only trap card to make it onto this list, and it's a bit of an interesting one, Get Out. So Get Out is a normal trap card that reads, target 2 monsters your opponent controls that were special summoned from the extra deck. Shuffle them into the deck. You can only activate 1 Get Out per turn. Now, when you read this card sounds incredible, right? Because there's so many different monsters that are special summoned from the extra deck that may have some sort of built-in protection from like destruction or anything like that, but this card completely dodges that. So when you're going up against these heavy combo decks, if you can stick this card and make sure that it doesn't get negated by something, you're getting a huge swing in tempo and advantage, because it is a 1 for 2, and most of the time when you're going up against these big combo decks, they're going to have more than one monster on the board that was special summoned from the extra deck. So I think that's amazing. Not to mention, it is a normal trap card, which means you can actually play this in tandem with a card like Trap Trick and search it out and effectively have like 6 copies of the card, with only having 3 in your deck plus the 3 Trap Trick, which Trap Trick's just a versatile card anyway, so this is just another tool in the Trap Trick arsenal. I think this is just a really neat card. This is kind of like a Storming Mirror Force type card, where I feel people are going to look to this, and maybe like the first big events that come around when this card is legal, people might test it out because people might not be expecting it, but then people are going to become more aware of its existence and start to play around it to a minor extent. I think the only decks that really benefit from this card substantially are decks like Paleozoic, or just any of like the heavy trap decks that can afford to play something like this because they play a slower game going up against the much heavier combo decks. But it's not a bad card. I think this is a really really good design. It does target, which could be a potential drawback in some instances, but for the most part, it's non-destructive removal. It's a +1 if you get it to resolve, taking those cards away from your opponent, and overall, it's a pretty solid card, so that's why I gave it my number 4 slot. Now, coming in at number 3, we have a card that's a little bit difficult to evaluate. Some people speak very highly of this card, and other people aren't so sure, but I think it has a very interesting niche, and that's why I put it a little bit higher up on this list, and that card is Giz Makoto Chi, the Serpentron Sky Slasher. Now, this card has quite an effect, so I'm going to go ahead and read that off. It's a level 8 Dark Machine effect monster with 2450 attack and defense. If this card is in your hand or graveyard as a quick effect, you can banish 8 cards from the top of your deck face down, special summon this card. You can banish 3 cards from your extra deck face down, then target 1 face-up monster on the field, destroy it. You can only use 1 Giz Makoto Chi, the Serpentron Sky Slasher effect per turn, and only once that turn. So this kind of reminds a lot of people of Fairy Tail Snow because it has a similar summoning condition, but Snow is banishing cards from the graveyard, where Giz Makoto Chi is actually banishing them from the top of the deck, and it's banishing them face down, which actually matters a lot, where Snow is banishing stuff face up, so that means that Snow was able to trigger cards that got their effects when they got banished. So that's a very big distinction that you have to realize. However, what's interesting about this is that this can also be special summoned from the hand, so it doesn't necessarily have to be in the graveyard to be summoned that way. So it's kind of like a Destrudo in that sense. But let's go ahead and talk about this card more in depth. Obviously, the first thing you're going to think of is like Gren Maju to Aiza when it comes to this, because you're banishing cards and just getting that monster's attack to just incredible heights. But I want to talk about it more from a meta application here. So when you hear Dark Machine level 8, the first thing that comes to mind is Orcust instantly, because that means you can summon this card when you're under the Orcust monster restrictions. Level 8 means you have potential abilities to go into a hard summon Dingirsu, which I don't think is going to happen like ever for the most part, but the synergy is there. But then you have these 2 very distinct effects, which is unfortunate you can't use them both in the same term, so you have to pick either special summoning it or destroying a monster. And the thing is, you could like theoretically in the end phase of your opponent's turn banish the top 8 of your deck, special summon this, then your turn rolls around, you can banish the 3 from your extra deck and then pop a card. That is something you could do, and that's probably like the best way to get use out of both effects. Or another way you could use this is taking advantage of the fact that it is a level 8, because this is essentially like rank 8 fodder. So think of a deck like, let's say, Danger Thunder Dragon. It can fully take advantage of a card like this. It's dark attributed, so it fits perfectly with the Chaos synergy. But let's say you have your end board and you have stuff like Double Colossus on the field, and you need 1 more level 8 to be able to make that Hope Harbinger. Well, you can just drop this Orochi right at the end and overlay it with one of your Colossus to make that Hope Harbinger, and now you have your full combo board. So the fact that this card effectively acts as like another extender, albeit it comes at a very hefty cost, but it depends on what your deck is built around and what you're willing to lose, because Destrudo effectively can be summoned in the exact same way as this card, although you're losing half your life points instead of cards from your deck. So it's kind of one of those things you have to weigh in your deck building process as to whether or not a card like this is going to fit. I don't know. It's a very interesting design, and I feel like there are some hidden synergies here that maybe we aren't fully aware of yet. I think this card does have a lot of potential, not necessarily because of the destroying effect, but more so because of the resummoning capabilities. I think that is something that people are going to try to abuse if they possibly can, especially because it's a quick effect, and that's why I went ahead and gave the Orochi my number 3 slot. But coming in at number 2, we have a Link monster that people are so excited is being released, especially because of a very significant change on the Forbidden and Limited list that just took place last week, Dragunity Knight Romulus. So for those of you who don't know, Dragunity Knight Romulus is a Wind Dragon Link effect monster, 1200 attack. It is a Link 2 with bottom left and bottom right arrows, and in effect reads, if this card is Link summoned, you can add 1 Dragunity spell or trap or 1 Dragon Ravine from your deck to your hand. If a dragon or dragons is special summoned from the extra deck to a zone this card points to, except during the damage step, you can special summon 1 dragon or winged beast monster from your hand in defense position, but for the rest of this turn, its effects, if any, are negated, and it cannot be used as a Link material. You can only use each effect of Dragunity Knight Romulus once per turn. I also should mention it does only require 2 dragon and or winged beast type monsters to make this card. So when you read this, it just sounds really good. I mean, yes, obviously there's the Dragunity synergy, which a lot of people are excited about, but I don't really think Dragunity is going to take off just because of this card's existence. I think what people are more excited about is that this is just more dragon support. With terraforming going to 1 on the most recent list, this is now a way for you to access Dragon Shrine much more consistently in any dragon-based deck, and the fact that it just requires any 2 dragons, I guess Wing Beast as well, but for the most part, we're just focusing on the dragon part here, that is absolutely pivotal. And the fact then that Dragon Shrine could just lead into even more combos, because then you can pitch cards for that, send more dragons to the graveyard, it's just going to continue to snowball out of control. But let's talk about that other effect too, because with this card, the fact that you can special summon a dragon out of your hand for free, that is just absurd. And like, yeah, its effects are negated, and yeah, you can't use it as link material, but guess what? It doesn't say you can't use it for synchro material, it doesn't say you can't use it for Xyz material, so that means that you can just go ahead and use it for whatever else you want, as long as it's not for a link summon. Also keep in mind too, it only negates the effects until the end of your turn, so if it's something with like a static effect, I'm not sure exactly where this would apply, but if it did have some sort of static effect, during your opponent's turn, that would turn back on, which means then if it's something that could disrupt them, or if it's just some sort of like floodgate-esque effect that would slow them down, then it's going to be online for their turn, and it's going to achieve exactly what you want it to. Romulus is a very powerful combo enabler, especially now that Tempest, Dragon Ruler of Storms, is now at 1. We might be able to see some very crazy combo decks, because we've already seen in the OCG, they already have stuff that's utilizing both this and Tempest. It's going to be a wild ride, and that's why I had to give Romulus my number 2 slot. But that is going to bring us to my number 1 card coming out of Rising Rampage, and if you haven't already figured it out, it's Palooza Bow of the Goddess. Oh my god, this card is crazy. So, Palooza Bow of the Goddess is a Link 4 effect monster that has an effect that reads as follows. It requires 2+ monsters with different names except tokens, has question mark attack, and is a Link 4. You can only control 1 Palooza Bow of the Goddess. The original attack of this card becomes 800 times the number of link materials used for its link summon. Once per chain, when your opponent activates a monster effect as a quick effect, you can make this card lose exactly 800 attack, and if you do, negate that activation. So, if you guys remember from way back in the day, Light and Darkness Dragon, yeah, this card is very reminiscent of that. Now, there are some distinct differences. Light and Darkness Dragon was mandatory, and it basically, like, negated anything. However, Palooza is a very nice modern, revival of an old card like Light and Darkness Dragon. So, why is this card so good? Well, I mean, it's basically 4 negations if you want it to be, and the fact that it's not a hard once per turn. It is a once per chain effect, which is significant, but, like, that doesn't really matter. Just the fact that this card is essentially 4 negates in a single card is crazy. Not to mention it'll be a 3200 body if you do use 4 monsters to link summon. But the thing is, you don't even have to do that. You could just link summon this for 2. It's gonna have 1600 attack, and it's still 2 negations. And yeah, it is a little bit susceptible for being destroyed by battle, but you have to think, if you're playing like a combo deck that already has multiple negations in addition to this, imagine just layering your negations with an Palooza in addition to everything else. Like, if you just have link 4 worth of material sitting on your field, and it's not really doing anything, you can just make this card, and now you have 2 extra negations on your board for monster effects for literally no reason. This is a card that so many decks can take advantage of. Salamangrate can use it, any of the combo decks can use it. Like, just so many decks are going to be looking to this card to find ways to just solidify their board and abuse it. Not to mention, going up against decks that are heavily monster based, like let's say Danger Thunder Dragon, this card can be very devastating, because since their decks are just comprised completely of monster effects, they're not going to have an easy way to get rid of this. I mean, usually you got stuff like, spell and trap forms of removal that could take care of this, like any sort of board wipe or something like mind control, but in Danger Thunder Dragon or any other monster-based combo deck, they don't have that option, so this card's going to stick around, going to be a pain in the ass for any of those combo decks to deal with, and that's why Palooza is well deserving of the number 1 card coming out of Rising Rampage. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.